Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick with me? Famous scenes with drama queens and heroes acted out there on the silver screen. Come grab a seat, the popcorn is on me.
Hello, welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here. Love spending time with you when we can, talking about films and cinema. And I got to say, I'm really happy to have Thomas Manning by my side, celebrating his 22nd birthday this week. I think for a month. Is that how you do that?
Yeah, pretty much you got to commit to it and don't look back. If your birthday, it's your birth week, it's your birth month.
Yes.
I mean, pretty much your
It's
birth year at that
so
point.
So you just keep celebrating.
Yeah, just keep going for
So
it.
congratulations. And I know that at midnight on the evening of your birthday, or the midnight of the day of your birthday, anyway, however is the best way to say it, you were singing and dancing to Taylor Swift.
Now that does not sound like me. I don't know where you would get that idea. There's not a video out there.
That's what I hear.
Not that I know of.
That's what I've seen.
That's crazy.
I got to tell you, man, Greg Tillman agrees. I think he's seen it. And what I love about your dancing is your high kicks. You do these weird, Karate Kid kicks when you dance, and that is just awesome. It's pure awesomeness.
I don't have much flexibility, but my legs are so long that it looks like they're going high. So
It really does. You look like those. Remember those like little dancing puppet things that were like wooden legs, and the legs would go up all that?
The paddle board.
Yeah, the paddle board.
Yeah,
that's exactly what you
Yeah.
look like, man.
Yeah.
He's a human paddleboard.
Yeah,
is what he
those
is.
were actually based off of my physique. So yeah.
Well, happy birthday, man. Glad to have you joining us. And Greg Tillman, back there, he was trying to work on some kind of cool intercom system, ear intercom system, so we could talk to each other, but we didn't have a chance to try it out. So maybe sometime while we're still doing the show, who knows? Who knows? Thomas, we got a lot to cover, man. There's a lot of films out there that we haven't had a chance to talk about in the past few weeks for various and sundry reasons. Not really sundry reasons, but for various reasons. But we've got, if we get to them, like 8 movies to talk about, which means we'll get to 3. And we'll start off with a new MCU film, The Eternals. This is Marvel's take with an Oscar winner at the helm.
Yeah, so this is Chloe Zhao. I believe this is only her 3rd or 4th feature film, and she's known for doing just very small, intimate, character-focused films. And of course, she won last year Best Director, Best Picture for Nomadland with Frances McDormand there at the helm. And The Eternals could not be more different.
Absolutely.
In some ways, but in other ways, it still has that very intimate focus of a Chloe Zhao picture.
Yeah, there are definitely moments where you see her fingerprints on this film, and you're like, oh yeah, that's Chloe.
Yeah. As far as focusing on the character drama and the relationships amidst a massive cosmic backdrop, an eternal backdrop, really. It's in the name, and it's called that for a reason. I mean, that's the name of these characters, the Eternals, but that very much plays into their existence, and just that's a perfect descriptor of how they kind of fit into the universe and the cosmos. We mentioned the Chloe Zhao effect. I think you really saw that in the first 2/3 of the film when you have some phenomenal on-location shooting, incredible use of natural lighting, probably some of the best-looking cinematography in the MCU. And I'll say that's specifically for the first 2/3, and maybe later on we'll get into. I think both of us had a few issues with the 3rd act, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Yeah, it's a film, and it's one of those movies that you don't want to say too much about, because I would say probably half an hour into it, some things start to happen that could be considered spoilers. But basically, the Eternals have been on Earth for thousands of years, protecting humanity from the Deviants. And the Deviants are these mythic, animal-like creatures that can fly, that can swim, that can do all sorts of things. And that's the purpose of the Eternals. That's why they feel they are called to be here. That's their mission.
Yeah, I mean, the Deviants are like the absolute top of the apex predator food chain. Other apex predators, like alligators, would probably cower in fear at the sight of a deviant.
Yes.
So then there are mentions of the apex predator in particular, and that comparison is made. And there are multiple mythologies that are working into this, mythologies from throughout human history, and very many different global religions
Yes.
are examined through this lens of the MCU, and all of that is combined with the mythology that we already know of the MCU and some pop culture, modern day contemporary pop culture, and all of that just in this really fascinating conglomeration of something that 5 years ago the MCU wouldn't have probably been this brave
Yeah,
to do,
I
but
agree.
now they know exactly the confidence that they have instilled in themselves, and that's why they can take big shots like this.
Yeah, and this is a different kind of MCU film. If you're going in expecting what you saw with Endgame or with Guardians of the Galaxy, or even Captain America, the Iron Man films, or Thor films, you may be disappointed because this is a different approach. There's a lot of backstory that unfolds through flashbacks. There's also a very huge, probably the most diverse international cast we've ever seen on screen as far as heroes are concerned, and that really, really impressed me.
Yeah, that was a very beautiful thing to see. People from so many different ethnic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, and all just there as a family unit working together. And it really is a story about family and how there are conflicts within that, but how much you're willing to set aside your differences to come together to fight for a common purpose, or maybe you have different purposes that you think you're working toward. And it's also a question, there are questions of identity and purpose.
Yes, yes.
When you think you've believed something your entire life, but then suddenly new information comes to light. And now how does that impact the way that you're approaching your goals and the way that you just live your life and just, really exist as, I would say as a human being, but they are godlike figures,
Right.
but they have very human-like qualities to them as well.
Yeah, I echo every one of those aspects of thematic elements that were weaved through this, but also the element of faith is strong through this, as we mentioned before, looking at global religions. Faith, belief in something beyond self, but also at odds what is destined compared to what is free choice and free will. Those themes run very, very strong through this, and I think if anybody wants to go in this and examine it almost from a theological standpoint and ask questions, I think this will be a fascinating study from really any type religion.
Yeah, I mean, another property in the MCU just recently we saw with Loki studied free will and predestination,
Yes.
how all that works together. But I'm not going to say this was directly. This was completely different from that
Right,
in the way
right.
that it explored it.
Exactly.
It's not like you're seeing the same story twice in the MCU. They're just the environment in which those themes and narratives are explored are completely different. I applaud the MCU for finding different ways to go about looking at similar questions, but just through different lenses each time.
I appreciated the cinematography, the sound design, I love the score. I've already talked about the characters and the backstories and the character arcs that we saw kind of unfold. But I did feel that this movie tried to do too much. I felt it's very dense as far as material. There's so much to try to take in. This is not a popcorn flick. It's one of those you're probably going to be thinking about and have to think about. So if you don't want to think about your MCU films, this may be one that you may want to steer clear from. We talked about that third act. That third act had a few issues, especially some of the CGI bothered me a bit. I think they could have done much better with CGI. And I know that Chloe wants to do as many practical effects as you can, but in an MCU film, you can't just do practical effects, not in one like this, unless it's, well, Logan, for example. You can do a lot of practical stuff with going back to Logan.
Yeah, I mean, that's really been a common complaint throughout the MCU's history, that the third act, they rely too heavily on CGI, and usually it doesn't bother me. Usually I can just look past it because I know what these films are, but when I saw the first 70% of this movie,
Yeah.
and really saw Chloe Zhao's vision shining through, I felt like that was kind of stripped away in the third act, and it went back to that typical Marvel formula, and it wouldn't have bothered me as much if we didn't see that potential of Chloe Zhao's just beautiful mind and creativity in those first 2/3. And so that was a bit of a letdown for me. And I'm not going to say it's the VFX artist's fault, because we know that they can do. I mean, they're the best in the business.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's Chloe's fault because she's not used to working with
Right.
heavy CGI, but I don't know if it's maybe just higher ups in the MCU,
Yeah.
some of the producers, if that's an issue with them. I don't really know, but it didn't, have a huge negative effect on my viewing experience, but I had to mention it, of course. So.
Right. And it does stay through the credits, as always within MCU. There's a mid-credit and an end-credit scene as well. And the one of the scenes has some pretty bad CGI as well with we'll just call him the Leprechaun. We'll just call him the Leprechaun. Any final thoughts or comments you want to share before you give your rating for The Eternals?
You mentioned Ramin Djawadi's score. It's probably one of my favorite scores in the MCU. And as always, we got to refer to Christian Jessup. So
yes.
Very fascinated to hear his thoughts about the score whenever he gets around to watching it. But yeah, I'm going to give The Eternals a solid B+.
Okay.
And, how common audiences and general MCU fans are going to react to it, I'm not sure, but that's something I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I'll make one more comment before my grade. There is one character that becomes this Bollywood movie star, and throughout the years he is. It was. You'll see what happens, but he's this Bollywood movie star, and so he's kind of confided in his producer that he's an Eternal, and so. While the movie's going on, there's also a behind-the-scenes documentary happening with his character kind of exploring and explaining what's going on. And that worked initially, but it really did get old after a while, and it felt kind of cheesy and forced.
It was really funny for the first 5 minutes, and then they just kept going back to it. And I was like, okay, it's time to wrap this little gimmick up. So.
Yeah. Well, my rating for The Eternals is a B rating. Thomas gave it a B+, so we can, you can kind of see where we are. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break. We spent a lot of time on The Eternals because it's MCU. We're going to spend a lot of time on that. We'll take a break, quick intermission right here. We're going to come back and talk about Dune and James Bond right after this quick intermission on Meet Me at the Movies.
I encourage my patients to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Vaccinations protect you from this serious disease. If you're trying to become pregnant now or plan to try in the future, you can get COVID-19 vaccines. Learn more at cdc.gov.
Hi, I'm Jill Nolan, your host for Woman to Woman, a show that is about women and for women. Each month, we feature guests that highlight topics that focus on self-care, health, and well-being, and a variety of other topics for women young and well-seasoned here in Cleveland County. Join us each month on Woman to Woman here at C19 TV, a broadcast service of Cleveland Community College.
Cleveland Community College has identified strengthening online learning as the topic for its quality enhancement plan. We're calling it SOUL. SOUL's 5-year implementation plan is focused on continuous improvement of online courses and promoting student success. We're excited for you to take this journey with us.
Hello, welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here, Thomas Manning there. We are talking cinema. Before the break, we talked about the Eternals B+ from Thomas, B rating for me, the new MCU film. Dune is a film that's been in theaters for a little bit of time. It's also a thinking person's film, Thomas. I don't know about a double feature between the Eternals and Dune, because Dune is not a popcorn Star Wars flick. It's more of a Shakespearean epic drama that just happens to have a backdrop, a sci-fi fantasy backdrop.
Yeah, and I think elements of the mythology within Dune actually influenced George Lucas originally, because I think Frank Herbert's novel preceded Star Wars, and Lucas took a lot of inspiration on that in just developing this massive world, but exploring it through intimate eyes of characters and keeping it character-driven, character-focused.
I thought it was beautifully shot. Some of these scenes, it's not a film that you would want to watch on your iPad Nano. Your iPod Nano. Let me say that one more time. Your iPod Nano. You don't want to watch this film on that. You do want to watch it on a big screen if you possibly can, and that can be in your home or it can be at theaters. I'll let you kind of choose on that. It is beautifully shot. The sound design, the costumes, and the makeup. I think as we start talking about the Oscars, you may be looking at costumes and makeup for this film.
Yeah, and you mentioned the cinematography, so Greg Fraser is the DP on this, and he's also going to be doing cinematography for the new Batman film with Robert Pattinson, directed by Matt Reeves, and we just saw a trailer for that recently, and the cinematography in that trailer alone just took my breath away, and he's having himself quite a year, and with Dune, just the things that are captured physically, so much of it is practical, you can tell. Just you can like, it's Dune, it's about sand dunes.
Right.
You can like feel the sand almost. Like just I felt that connection with the environment, and it just like was something that put me right there in the midst of it all. Like, I mean, I didn't feel like my life was in danger like so many of these characters did, but I felt almost like physical sensations just from the watching experience of it.
Yeah, Anakin Skywalker would not have enjoyed being on the set of Dune. Probably
not.
Yeah, I think the production design on this film pretty solid as well. And production design, Thomas, is really fascinating now because it's so solid that you sometimes cannot tell the difference between what is practical and what is a digital set. They have just done so well and come so far. And this film, everything from a technical standpoint for Dune really was incredibly solid. I thought the casting was well done as well. Timothée Chalamet is honestly, he's the star. He's the kind of core that brings everything together. But you've got a lot of others on this cast too that are worth mentioning.
Yeah, Rebecca Ferguson, who plays the character of Paul, which is Chalamet's character, plays Paul's mother. And she's one of my favorite actresses. We know her from the Mission Impossible movies and from Greatest Showman. Just wherever she pops up, I'm there. I have
Reminiscence as well.
Yeah, Reminiscence earlier this year. Also give Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa, Dave Bautista, Stellan Skarsgård in there in heavy prosthetics.
Oh,
he
yeah.
is, it's pretty much.
He looks like Jabba the Hutt, man. He really does, doesn't he?
Yeah, like a creepier version of Jabba the Hutt because he's like half man, half Hutt, and it's an image that will stick with you for a while.
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
Yeah, and then also Stephen McKinley Henderson, which he is he's a grad of North Carolina School of the Arts.
Yes.
And so gotta mention him, give a shout out to him. He's a great character actor. I love whenever he appears in a project. And you mentioned it's not a popcorn flick. There may be two major action sequences, but there are some of the most like just engrossing action sequences that I've ever seen, just from a standpoint of what you see and what you hear, and just how it makes you feel like just in your chest. It's it's a true cinematic experience. But I don't say that meaning that you have to see it in a movie theater, because you actually watched it at home, and I think you had a great experience.
Oh
as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I watched it big screen TV. Thomas got a 3,000-inch screen last year for Christmas, and it is pretty massive, and so you feel like you're in a theater with that. But yeah, I don't think you have to watch this in theaters, but I do think the larger the screen that you can access, the better probably your experience is going to be. I wouldn't want to watch it on my phone or a small laptop, but it's still worth checking out. Thomas, it's not a film though that I'm going to go back to time and time again. And let's say, I'm gonna tell the audience this is part one, and that's one of the big questions is they did not shoot part one and part two. So, you know, if the money isn't exactly what they hope for, we may never see how this movie ends.
Yeah, the good thing is based on you know, box office opening. Well, it actually opened internationally before it came over to the United States, and it's at like 200 million plus worldwide so far. And considering we're still in the middle of the pandemic, those are numbers they're looking for, and that's not even taking into account the HBO Max numbers. So it's looking like it's going to make enough money for that sequel. And I'm actually going to disagree with you. This is one I do want to watch over and over again.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I've been meaning to go back and watch it when I have the time. I haven't had time for a second viewing yet, but probably, you know, might go home and pop it on HBO Max, or I still want to see it on IMAX as well.
Right.
But yeah, it actually is one that I'm going to return to.
So why? Let me ask you why.
Just because, you know, so I actually had this note when I first watched it that as far as films in my life that I've seen that just truly astounded me by their scope, but also their, you know, character-driven story.
Right.
I think of films like, of course, Star Wars original trilogy.
Yeah.
Then I think of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Then I think of The Matrix, Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then, you know, Terminator Judgment Day,
Yeah.
Interstellar, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I would put Dune in the category with those movies.
Okay.
And so that's why, just the emotions that it stirs and just, you know, the feelings that it elicits, that's why I would return to it time and time again.
Okay.
But it's not going to be like that for everybody, and I understand that.
Yeah,
So.
I do keep coming back to Shakespearean because that's what I felt the whole time as I was watching this. When you're looking at the thirst for power, you're looking at betrayal, you're looking at wars between, you know, whether it's nations or clans or whatever, you know, all of those things come into play, and love and loyalty, all of those things I think about Shakespeare, and all those were right there in Dune as well.
Yeah, most certainly.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to give Dune a solid A-.
Okay.
That might go up based on rewatch.
Okay.
So I don't know where you're sitting.
Yeah,
with
for
it,
me,
but-
I'm setting at a B as well. A B for this. I thought it was a good film for what it was in so many ways, but it is one that you again have to invest your time, invest your mind, and you really do have to think about this film. Dune, now in theaters. Also still in theaters, James Bond, No Time to Die. Daniel Craig is back for his final run as James Bond. And I tell you, I've grown up watching James Bond and various people performing and taking on that role. My first one was Live and Let Die with Roger Moore, and I went back and revisited the others as well. But Daniel Craig has become my favorite. And a big part of that, I think, has to do with seeing a story and a story arc that continues from film to film to film. They build off of each other. They are all connected in one way or another. Doesn't mean you can't watch them out of order, but the connections do and can matter if you take the time to be a part of this. This film was just absolutely crazy to watch on the big screen. I loved it on so many different levels, except when Thomas and I watched it, and there was a woman not only getting text and phone calls, but actually calling people back on her phone. That disturbed Thomas so much that he left his dad at the theater and came back and picked him up. I felt like a teenager, a 12, 13-year-old waiting for my dad to pick me up at the front of the theater, and that did happen.
Okay, I was really hoping you wouldn't bring that up, but in my defense, I had seen No Time to Die before. I saw it a few weeks ago, and actually I reviewed it on a special audio podcast of Meet Me at the Movies with Christian Jessup, friend of the show. And we keep mentioning Christian on here, but that's because he just made such an impact while he was here.
That's right.
And we love him.
And Hans Zimmer did the music, and Christian got to work with Hans Zimmer.
Yeah. So if you go back and listen to that episode, Christian does really deep dive into Zimmer's music and why it might be his favorite Bond score. But
it did everything I wanted for a Bond film, but also everything that I wanted, as we know that Daniel Craig is walking away. I thought it provided incredible and realistic closure for the character, we had some other cast members that showed up. Rami Malek, Oscar winner, who is the bad guy, one of the bad guys, the chief bad guy in this. That if you've watched any of the trailers, I'm not giving anything away, but you know that there's something relating to biological warfare. and he's wanting to kind of reset the clock. He's wanting to be Thanos.
Yeah.
It's basically what he's wanting to do.
And there's so much of, it is biological warfare, and it's like microscopic biological warfare. And this was, written, directed, and completed prior to the pandemic.
Yes.
Which is just so strange. How many films were looking back that were supposed to be released around that time? And it's like we had some sort of collective premonition that this was coming up, this was going to happen. And it's just really interesting to look at that.
This movie has great drama, it has amazing action, and the character development for the main characters are there, and you get to understand who they are, why they are, and what motivates them. And I think that's a difficult thing to do even for sometimes those supporting characters, but I felt it did such a solid job on that.
Yeah, and we mentioned CGI is a major issue in some third acts of many blockbusters, but that's not the case here. This is one of the best looking blockbuster films you'll see, not just this year, but really ever. The craft and the photography and the lighting, the framing, you just don't see it in a lot of big budget films like this. And so I would compare it to the Mission Impossible franchise in that sense. So I just got to give major shout out to all the folks that went into crafting everything with just such precision and such care.
One of the first films to be delayed because of the pandemic, finally getting a chance to explore No Time to Die, and it was worth the wait.
Yeah.
It was worth the wait for me.
Yeah, I don't think we even mentioned who the director was, but it's a director, Cary Fukunaga, and he's very, very talented, and he directed Beasts of No Nation. He directed the first season of True Detective.
Yeah.
And his contributions to the James Bond universe, we're going to remember this one forever.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
major props to Cary Fukunaga on that. And I'm going to give No Time to Die a solid A- as well.
Okay, for me, a solid A rating for No Time to Die, still in theaters. Well, Thomas, we don't have time to do any deep dives into anything else, but Halloween Kills is still in theaters, so you want to give a 30-minute take on this Jamie Lee Curtis back in action again against her brother Michael Myers.
Yeah, Halloween Kills. It's just left a really bad taste in my mouth. It's a very just mean movie. I think with many horror stories, you can find some empathy at the core and some genuine heart and genuine emotion. And despite some attempts, that just did not come to fruition with Halloween Kills. Unless you're a major fan of the franchise, you can probably skip Halloween Kills. It didn't do it for me. I watched it with my sister Catherine, and she was not a fan of it either. I've talked to a lot of people who felt the same way. So yeah, you can probably skip out on Halloween Kills. Solid, C rating for that.
C rating.
Yeah.
All right, average film for Halloween Kills. I do appreciate everybody spending time with us right here on Meet Me the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here, Thomas Manning there, Greg Tillman. Keeping things going back there on Mission Control. I am going to leave you with a movie quote of the week. This does come from Dune. This is Duke Leto Atreides. There is no call we do not answer. There is no faith that we betray. Until next time, that is a wrap.